The next artist that we're looking at is Rembrandt. This perhaps is a name that you're familiar with. He's quite famous. And we're looking at his most famous painting, which we can just call The Night of the Watch, which is the common name it's called by. And it was painted in 1642. So one thing to notice right away is the size of this painting. It is larger than 11 feet by 14 feet. It's a huge canvas. Traditionally speaking, canvases of this size were dedicated to battles of, heroic scenes, or they were dedicated to like a king or his family or something like that. They were not used to show like the everyday ordinary people. But that in fact is what Rembrandt is doing. So this is a militia of commoners. So they are living in this town, and at this time period there were a lot of like little skirmishes between towns and cities. And so they're like the night watch. They're going to go and patrol the streets and make sure that everything is good and that, nobody from another town is coming in and stealing stuff or whatever. So the subject matter in that way is very unusual for this size painting. The other thing is you see how dark it is. Well, it's probably darker now than it was originally. And over the years and not great cleaning processes and stuff like this, it probably is a bit darker than when Rembrandt originally painted it. But needless to say, it still has that Baroque that I keep talking about kind of element here, where we have our dark background and we have this highlighted image of light. We have the, we have the lancets here, right? And many of them are going at diagonal directions. In fact, you have this where a number of them cross right here. And then you have the flag on this side, you have the gun or the musket over here. So as you look, you'll see more and more diagonals in this painting. And once again, diagonals are always indicating movement. They just lead your eye in a diagonal motion. It just makes it feel like there's movement. And I've said that I don't know how many times this semester. So here you have the person who's in charge of this militia, and he is highlighted almost like a general would be in this grand army or something. So again, it's very unusual for the time period to make a painting like this of such large scale. Now, Rembrandt, though, more than anything, is known for his printmaking. And I'm not going to go through this too much because a couple of weeks ago I had videos up and I showed you stuff and explained this in great detail. But this is a dry point. So he's doing an etching, a lot of etching techniques. So just remember, it's a metal plate. He's etching into it with a needle or something, putting it in an acid bath, and then he's having the ink in the groove that he made, and he's printing off of that. Here's an amazing example. So this is a dry point etching, like I just showed you. This is called the Three Crosses, and it was created in 1653. It's printed in 1653. And Rembrandt was such a master printmaker because of a couple of things that I'll show you. So this is the biblical story of Jesus, and as Jesus is being crucified, there are two other men that were being crucified with him, if you know the story. One of them yells out to Jesus and asks for redemption, and he is forgiven for his sins and he's allowed to go to heaven. The other does not ask for redemption and he goes to hell. So we see this figure here, of course, is Jesus, and then we see this figure, the way he is stretched back and the light is coming down. He's the one that asks for redemption. His soul is going to heaven. The way Rembrandt uses light and dark in this print is amazing. So we have the figures that are furthest back here. They're just simple kind of line drawings, and then you have more detail over here, but there's still just kind of the outline, right? You have a little bit of shading here. Then as you move forward, he switches, and instead of being line drawings, now things that are closer are clearer to us, right? So then he switches and he makes the background light and the subject or the person dark. So here he makes the person light with the background darker. And in that way, it plays with your depth perception, and it allows you to really have this understanding that these are much closer. He also frames this with these very dark sides so that we have this, real indication of light coming down from the heavens. And then of course the main character here is almost directly in the center of the painting, and his body is light, but he is very deliberately outlined by this very, very dark line here to make his body pop, and he has more detail than just about anybody else that's back here. Really, really amazing with his technique of printmaking. And here's his self-portrait he did. Now, Rembrandt unfortunately didn't have such a great life. So he had some problems with addiction, namely gambling and alcohol. So even though he was able to have this great living that he was making from being a painter and a printmaker, he dies penniless penniless and in debt because he had lost money gambling. And so he shows himself here not in the best of light, really. This is towards the end of his life. This is, I believe, the last self-portrait he did in 1658. And if you remember back, we had a portrait a couple of classes ago of Albrecht Dürer, and I showed you that, and he made himself look like Jesus, and he had light on his forehead and on his hand, and so he's making this claim that he was like God-like, and he was so smart, and he also had this ability to paint. He was truly the artist genius, right? So that's what he was making his claim to be. What is Rembrandt really saying in this painting? Well, he looks rather haggard, old, tired, overweight, out of shape, and he doesn't have any light on his forehead. He's not claiming in any way to be super brilliant. He does have light on his hand, so he is making reference to, yeah, he's a good artist. He knows he's a good artist. And then the light is here. Maybe he's trying to say, like, I don't know, he's a good talker, he has a good heart. I'm not quite sure. But it's definitely not making the claim of being any kind of artistic genius. We have a few women, right, that we've come to, and we'll have a couple more, and as we move forward, we'll have more women. So Judith Lester, and at this time period, women now are starting to be allowed to study and have careers in art, but still extremely difficult for them. And they are never going to be allowed to do historic paintings, which were the money makers. So they're more or less just doing portraiture and what's called genre painting. So genre painting is a painting of everyday kind of life. And that's what she's allowed to do. So she paints this picture almost like a calling card that she wants to show she can paint in two really distinct styles here. So she can paint you very, very realistically. Here she is, self-portrait, showing herself painting. But then she can also paint like this, which is not as realistic. So it's interesting that within this one painting, she's depicting two styles. She's sticking to the Baroque, where we don't have our background really, and she's got the use of light that she's playing with. This brings us to Vermeer, and this is an interesting painting. You probably, if you know anything by Vermeer, you might know The Girl with the Pearl Earring, because it was made as a book and a movie and everything. But we're going to look at this one because it's a little bit more telling of the time period. So this is woman holding a balance from circa 1664. So this is just the style. They wore these big bushy skirts. She's not pregnant, okay? It's just huge skirts at the time. So she's at this table and she has a balance and she has all these jewels on the table. So she's weighing out gold or something like that to see the value of things. She's bathed in this light, which doesn't really quite make sense, but it does make for a beautiful painting. And then if you look closely, what's behind her is an image of the Last Judgment. So we've looked at many images of the Last Judgment. And so this woman turns her back to the painting. So what Vermeer is trying to state is that at this time period in Northern Europe, people are really less concerned with the church and with salvation and the afterlife, and they're more concerned with material goods. It's at this time we have the rise of the merchant class, and so people are making lots of money between trading and selling things, and also with colonization, because, you know, we're 1492 is Columbus, so we're well past the discovery of the Americas, and before the discovery of the Americas, Africa had already started to be colonized. So people are making a lot of money off of colonization. Genre painting, I just mentioned this before. So this is, Haarlem is actually also in Amsterdam, around Amsterdam, there's a Haarlem. And so this is a genre painting, and it's a painting then of an everyday scene. So you've got the people out in the field who are working here, and you've got the town in the background, the church, again, way off and off center, so not as important anymore, right? We've got our windmills here, very typical for this part of the world. They've been using wind power for hundreds and hundreds of years. And this, though, because we have this kind of light bathing this, there is some reference here to the idea of the Great Flood and of Noah's Ark.